The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Reynolds.
Chair recognizes Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment strikes the phrase separate is not inherently unequal by retaining the language that says equal does not mean same or identical. The phrase separate is not inherently unequal mirrors the logic of Plessy versus Ferguson, a case that upheld racial segregation 50 years ago. That phrase was used to justify separate schools, water fountains, transportation, and oppression. That phrase's inclusion here, even if a different context, is reckless and unnecessary. Our laws should move us forward, not echo a time when the state power was used to divide and exclude. This amendment ensures we do not repeat history by embracing segregation era logic in Texas code. The bill already asserts that equal does not mean same or identical. That phrasing preserves the bill's intent to recognize differences. This amendment keeps that intact while removing language that invites dangerous interpretations. Codifying separate is not inherently unequal could be used by bad actors or hostile courts to justify broad exclusions of people from public life, especially transgender, intersex, and non-binary Texans. It sets a tone and a legal foothold in systemic separation. Legislators do not write in a vacuum. Courts, agencies, and future lawmakers will look to this language when deciding how to treat people. This amendment helps ensure that Texas is not a testing ground for discriminatory precedent. Even if supporters claim that the phrase is harmless, which I do believe that the bill author's intent, the history is clear. It was used to maintain inferior systems for Black and colored Americans for decades. There is no neutral or benign way to recycle that language. Let's be honest about what this signals, including that phrase doesn't just clarify policy, it sends a message that government sanctioned separation is acceptable. That's a message we must reject. This amendment removes that threat. It tightens the bill, avoids unnecessary legal baggage, and ensures the law doesn't become a backdoor to state-sponsored exclusion. We ask ourselves, what's the goal? If the aim is to clarify biological definitions, then we don't want to have this phrase. If it's something else, then that's a whole nother conversation. I urge you to support this amendment to preserve the integrity of our statutes and shield Texans from harmful legal interpretations down the line. I move passage.
Chair recognizes Ms. Troxclair to speak against the amendment.
Members, this amendment strikes intentional language about the discrimination that women have historically suffered, and for that reason, I move to table.
Chair recognizes Mr. Reynolds to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I don't argue that that's the author's intent, but this language is certainly a slippery slope with dangerous legal precedent from a dark time in our nation's history. We have overcome this language with Brown versus Board of Education, and I ask you to follow me and reject the motion to table. Vote no.
Mr. Manuel, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes.
Gentleman yields for questions.
You're talking about, basically, we're talking about separate but equal.
Absolutely.
Can you give some examples of how bad it has been to have separate but equal in this country?
Well, Representative Manuel, I will submit to you that there were times when separate but equal, it was lawful for us to have separate facilities where you had colors only water fountains, colored only people that had to go to separate portions of a movie theater. There were times when people had to go to the back of the bus. There were times where people had separate but equal, quote unquote, schools where they had the colored people had to go to one school. In fact, here in Austin, the University of Texas at Austin was once that school where Heman Sweat was denied entrance into the University of Texas. They had to create a separate school, which was called Texas State College for Negroes, that is now known as Texas Southern University. So this separate but equal has a long history in racial segregation. And I'm so proud that because of our ancestors who made good struggle and good trouble, and the people of good conscience of all races, not just African Americans, but people of good conscience, have said that is not the America that we hold, where all people are created equal. That we had a Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall that argued the Brown versus Board of Education that ended separate but equal in this country. So we don't need to regurgitate this Jim Crow relic language of our past.
And one last question, going off of, again, separate but equal and what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, was the Civil Rights Movement about separating only certain people, or was it about bringing everyone together so that there wasn't any kind of separation of who we are as human beings?
Could you repeat that question?
I said, was the Civil Rights Movement at all about keeping us separate only by race, or was it by keeping us together by race, gender, sexual orientation, gender expression? Was that what we fought for during that time period?
Actually, the Civil Rights Movement was about removing separate barriers. It was about inclusion. It was about making sure that children were not separated on the basis of race or religion or national origin, that all means everyone, that everyone could matriculate in the same spaces, not based on separation based on gender or race. So that's what the Civil Rights Movement was about. It was about inclusion for everyone. And that, in fact, when you hear about Dr. King's dream, it was that all of his children will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So yes, the point of it is to have a level playing field, so there is no separate. Separate is not equal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your amendment.